Hello world, this is Lisa Friedrichsen, your friend and computer science professor with one more screencast in my Coding Bootcamp 101 series where we're going to put all 5 technologies, HTML, CSS, JavaScript on the front end, and a server-side language of PHP and a relational database of MySQL on the back end, all together in one short demo. And here's my little web page to show that. I've got a little style there behind my button, and if I click that button, I've changed the content on my page. So there's where my JavaScript is coming into play. And we know that the browser reads HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But when it comes to querying information out of a database, that database obviously has to be on the server. So I'm using PHP and SQL, structured query language, to go grab data out of a MySQL relational database on the server. And here's a demo of that. I've got a small little form here with one label, one input box, and one submit button. And when I type in the name that I want and click find that name, the PHP and SQL are going to query the database and then return the results of that query. And I've echoed out even the query to this web page. So let's go look and see what that code looks like. Here's my page in Notepad++ that I wrote locally. And of course, I'm working in HTML5 with your normal HTML5 tags. I've got a little embedded style sheet. And of course, we want to emphasize that HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and PHP should all be in their own separate files for maintainability and for reusability. For convenience sake, I put all of that code into this one page. So I've got my HTML, I've got my CSS. Here's where my PHP script starts. We're going to skip that for now and go down to the rest of the HTML. The thing I really want you to focus on is this form tag. When I'm using a server-side relational database, I'm interacting with it, inserting data and selecting data using form input boxes. Because after all, form input box is what creates a box for the user to enter in data. So usually I will have form tags surrounding anything that selects data from a relational database or inserts data into a relational database. Here's my label. What name do you want? Here's my input box with the name of first name. And then here's my submit button. Find that name. The key thing to look for in the HTML is in the opening form tag, you'll have a method by which you send your data to the server. And then the action is the file that picks up that data. And I'm actually using the same file to both interact with my user and also to process whatever my user is doing. Typically, we use a second file to process whatever is happening. When I submit Mary to the server, then this PHP program kicks in. And I'm not attempting to teach you PHP. What I really want you to get out of this demo is where all of these technologies fit in a full stack. This is the code to establish the connection. If the connection is made successfully, I'm echoing out connection established and I'll break to the web page. And then I'm picking up whatever name was submitted in that first name input box and echoing that out. And that's where Mary comes from. Next, I'm creating an SQL string. And this is where your knowledge of SQL comes into play. Structured query language is going to look very similar no matter what language you insert it into. So I'm selecting the first name and the last name from the customer table, where the first name is like, and then whatever I've typed into the name. I've used this function to sanitize the input just a little bit. And then I'm echoing out that SQL string. It's right here. And then finally, I'm going through the results and echoing out first 2 things in the array that I have selected, and that's first name and last name. And there we go. I found 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 customers in my database with the name Mary, and then I'm closing my connection. This series is not intended to teach anyone HTML, CSS, JavaScript, PHP, nor MySQL, but I hope it's making more sense now as to where these languages are processed. We know that PHP is processed at the server. Here's what my PHP looks like when I write it locally. I've used FileZilla to transfer this file up to the server, and then I'm calling this page off my server. Notice that that's not a local address. That's a server-side address. Let's look at what this page looks like when it's processed by the server, then sent down to my browser. If I view the page source, see, I am seeing text here. I'm not seeing any PHP code once I call that page off the server. That's because all this PHP that I wrote locally, when I submitted this file to the server and when it was called down into a browser, was processed at the server. And that script was replaced with the resulting code that the script created. So you're never going to pull up a PHP file and then right-click and view the source and see any PHP. By the time you call a PHP down from a server, the PHP script has already been processed. And it may just be a PHP script without SQL, or it may be doing something to a server-side database, such as selecting data or inserting data, and in which case that PHP will also be combined with SQL. Let's also look at my database on the server. Here's my server, and I'm using PHP My Admin to manage my SQL database, and here are all the tables in my database. Here's my customer table that I was running after, and here's all the customers that have the name Mary in them that I have mocked up in my database. So I have a name that fits several times. There you have it, all 5 technologies in one file: HTML, CSS, a little JavaScript function at the bottom, and then PHP with embedded SQL query against a relational database. The key thing for you to realize is that, of course, you will be writing all of this code locally on a machine. But to process the PHP, to process SQL, you're going to have to work against a server where the compiler for the PHP is loaded and the relational database is loaded. You can simulate all of that server-side functionality in an IDE such as NetBeans or Eclipse or Visual Studio. But in my opinion, if you use a real server so that you can pull that file down in any browser that's connected to the internet, it emphasizes exactly where all these technologies are running, and it's a lot more meaningful and rewarding. Thank you.